a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause the Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. The pennant race, schmennant race. We've got an initials matchup to talk about.
Yeah, pennant race,
Episode.
race. How are you going to spell that for the title? Yeah, we're no longer, he's John, I'm Aaron. You guys know that. We're no longer partners, John. We're rivals now. Mm-hmm. We were always kind of partner rivals.
Sure,
that's
fair. That's right.
But now just straight up rivals.
That's right.
Because we've been...
only one can advance.
That's right, and it'll probably be neither of us, if we're being honest with ourselves here. Is it the second annual?
The second annual.
Initials Game Invitational Tournament, which we were both in last year.
Yes.
On the
Power Trip.
The Power Trip morning show.
Right.
We've both been selected for the 45-person field.
Yes.
I'm the number 11 seed, and John is the number 20 seed out of 45.
Good.
And miraculously...
Seems about right.
Yeah. I think I'm overseeded probably. I've only played twice, but...
I think I've only played 3 times.
Yo, I didn't... You're underseeded. Miraculously, we're in the same bracket. So we are facing off...
Not just the same bracket, but I mean the same...
Well, yeah, the group. Same
matchup, yeah.
We're facing off on August 18th, Friday morning, early in the morning. Too early.
Flying back from a week of playing hard in Philadelphia. I'm not going to be in my best shape on that Friday
well, I have
morning.
a proposition for you then that I think can add some spice to this. But our other competitors in this 5-person group is Tom Pelissero, who's the top seed, the number 8 overall seed from I guess from NFL Network now, but a long time. I think he must still live here. Here's a story I'll tell you about Tom Pelissero. I went to a backyard barbecue at Michael Rand's house one summer, many summers ago, and his dog took a crap right next to my foot. That's really the only story I have on Tom Pelissero. Great, nice guy, very good NFL reporter. Formerly was a big part of 1500 ESPN when they first launched, like a decade or more, I guess, ago. So he has played once and won. Okay. So he's seeded high. He's the number 8 seed. Then the fourth person is Tommy Olson. Former golfer. Yeah. You've probably spent many hours in many bars.
I have spent some hours with Tommy Olson.
Yeah, I've met him a few times. He's a good guy. Yep. A lot of fun.
Yes.
Doesn't strike me necessarily as the biggest initials game threat, but who knows?
Yeah, but he's going to be, he will be much more up at like anything current. Any pop culture.
And he surely
pop culture.
played more often than we have because he's on the show constantly. He's a regular on their show, right?
How many times he's played.
And then the fifth person in our group is Elizabeth Reese, who is a local television personality. I don't think I've ever met her. But that's our group of 5. It's not exactly the group of death in terms of like how they talk about World Cup groups. But only one will survive, like you said. And here's what I would like to pitch to you, John. Okay. When I was a child or a teenager even, I would watch WWF at the time, now WWE Wrestling.
All right.
And one of the gimmicks they would often use for, over-the-hill wrestlers nearing the end of their career, superstars, but on their last legs, that person would challenge a current star to a loser retires match.
Oh, I got it. Yep.
And so here's my pitch to you. Now, if Tom Pelissero or Tommy Olson or Elizabeth Reese win, then it's just a moot point. Then we're both just losers and we go on with our lives.
Right.
But if you win, I retire from the initials game. And if I win, you retire from the initials game.
Here's why this is a terrible bet. I'm not going to take it.
Okay. Because you think I'll win?
No, because you want to retire anyway.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm doing it. I didn't even want to play this year. I messed up by not telling Corey before he asked. I was thinking about how do I say to Corey, I really appreciate being part of the show. And it was fun, but I think that's playing twice. That's good for me. Like I don't like getting up early in the morning, and I don't like competing at 8 a.m. And also I don't think I'm that good. So I like to leave kind of an air of mystery because I did so well in my debut. And so the more games I play, the more obvious it will be that I just had beginner's luck.
Right.
And before I could send kindly worded text in that regard. He texted me and said, "You in for this year?" And I said, "Yeah." So yeah, you're right. So when I challenged you to a retirement match,
that's funny.
You saw through my.
Here's the best part. Here's probably why I should take it though.
Yeah.
Is you do want to retire.
So maybe I'll throw it.
So, well, at the very least, I can count on you to throw it. And I'm picturing something like a Rocky III montage, where you got me running on the beach or something to try and get me in peak form
because I want you to win.
Yeah, because if any of the other three win, you don't get to retire.
Yeah, I got you.
You got to build me up.
I got you at the meatpacking plant punching steaks. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the power trip and just like some sort of pop culture thing. Like I picture me in a Clockwork Orange situation with my eyeballs pried open. You're trying to just pump pop culture, Entertainment Weekly or whatever stuff.
You're just going through Halle Berry's entire
Jeopardy
filmography.
There you go.
That's what
lot of Jeopardy.
Tripped John up last time. He had a layup
I think
for Halle Berry.
I think you mean Haley Barton.
Burton. You don't even remember what you said. You said Haley Burton. So yeah, that'll be August 18th. And I guess that's a Friday morning. So maybe we'll do this show afterward. Like we'll come back here afterward.
Yeah, that works out well.
After we've both been defeated by Tommy Olson and or Tom Pelissero and or Elizabeth Reese.
Yeah, so the Friday the 18th one will be slightly delayed. You might not get that by lunchtime, folks.
Yeah, although we'll be done by 9:30.
Maybe we can record it right there. We'll just walk right out of rock into one of the green room over there, and
we'll get the winner on as a guest. So yes, that's what we're doing on the 18th. I normally would be very competitive with John here in almost any other circumstance.
Sure.
But he's figured out my grift that I'm trying to pull on him.
I'm
very appreciative to be invited. It's fun.
Sure.
But you know me, after I do something fun, my initial reaction, no pun intended, my initial reaction is, well, let's never do that again.
Yeah,
no matter how fun it was.
Yeah, right.
Like I come home from concerts or stand-up comedy shows, which is my favorite thing to go to.
Right.
I went, I go see John Mulaney, and he's fantastic. And I get home and I go, let's never go to one of those again, even though I loved it. So I don't know. Corey's smart to just invite me and assume I'll do it.
Exactly.
A few other things before we get cooking on the Twins topics here, because there's a lot of stuff. They're back from their largely very successful road trip, although one that ended with a thud, which their road trips tend to do.
Yeah.
I think I saw they're 1-6 now. In like the final game of these things. I think Phil Miller looked that up yesterday. I don't have all the details.
That sounds like a Phil thing to look up.
I saw it on Twitter, and then right after the game yesterday, which was a mid-afternoon game our time in Seattle, I reached whatever new limit Twitter has on seeing tweets.
Oh, okay.
So it was like, all right, I guess I'm just done for the day. You can't send tweets. You can't look at tweets. I was like, okay. So I couldn't look up as much stuff for today's show. But a few things just to mention. So we did 2 regular episodes on Patreon this week, Monday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
The one on, Wednesday was what we've been promising, a more kind of in-depth breakdown of the hitting trade market.
Well, first of all, we spent 45 minutes dissecting the first 2 games of that Seattle series as well. There's a lot of news and notes from that. So we covered that, and then also spent another 45, maybe an hour almost. No, it's about another 45 minutes. This was an hour and a half episode. Detailing probably 15, 20 names
hitters that they could go after. And then what we're going to do is Monday, we'll do the pitching part of that for Patreon. Correct. Now we'll touch on some of that stuff on this show too, but the Patreon, what it's for are the 2 things John just described, which is talking about games right after they happened and, breaking stuff down for 45 minutes that we might talk about for 8 minutes on this show. So if you're into that, it'd be just in general, if you join the Patreon, which is Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman, you get charged $1 for new episodes. If we don't put out an episode, you don't get charged anything. And if you were to join right now and stick with us through the trade deadline, it'll probably cost you like $5 because you'll get
you get the emergency
Monday and Wednesdays shows, and then another Monday show, and then anything that happens, we'll do an emergency show. Like if they make a trade, we'll do a show within hours.
We'll probably also be doing a Wednesday Wednesday show right after
recap.
The trade deadline as well.
So anyway, be a good time to join. You can always quit, cancel anytime.
I mean, for that matter, if you want to just join throughout the season and enjoy the pennant race that much, it's probably going to cost you a total of $20.
That's asking a lot. This is a short-term commitment.
Right, yeah.
You know. So, yeah, I mean, I think road trip-wise, you go and you – first of all, they entered the first half just an absolute mess. And so the reset – whatever, or just being able to play Oakland coming out of the break very much helped. Oakland's terrible. They sweep Oakland. Wasn't the prettiest sweep, but it's a line drive in the box score, as they say. Right. You go 3-0 against Oakland. In Oakland, you go to Seattle, which is the Mariners are largely in the same spot as the Twins. Performance-wise, they happen to be in a much tougher division, and so they're much longer odds to make the playoffs. And they're not going to. I mean, they can't win that division, but they can make the playoffs as a wild card. I mean, they could. And
then they're trying to decide whether they're going to buy or sell right now.
And so it was interesting. And I think stylistically, the Mariners are similar too, which is that they have really good starting pitching, like 4 deep. We saw Castillo yesterday. We saw Kirby, who's really good. Gilbert is really good generally. They have very, very good starting pitching. Bullpen's pretty good, but maybe not a strength. And then the lineup is just very inconsistent. Right. Guys having some down years that you would have expected them to be pretty good. Well, that's how I would describe the Twins, too. So I thought it was an interesting matchup. I think the Twins played pretty well, generally. Yesterday, even, I didn't think they played horribly, other than they just didn't hit. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter.
That's versus Kirby, too.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good. But it was one of those games that reminds you, I think, things don't just get fixed like that. Well, like you have they scored 42 runs in the first 6 games coming out of the break, and you go, all right, well, there you go. The offense is clicking here. Julien and Kirilloff are clicking.
Well,
Perez coming around. And
that was part of the concern was that so much of the offensive quote unquote resurgence we saw on this road trip was basically due to 2 guys, right? Which is great. Like it's got to start somewhere, right? But it was mostly being driven by 2.
They would have killed for
2 unbelievable weeks.
They would have been killed for 2 guys having a good week though at any point in the first half. But yes, I agree. But then not only did they get shut out by a very good pitcher and a good closer at the end there, but I think they got 1 guy in the scoring position, 13 strikeouts, 0 walks. That's just, it wipes away whatever kind of goodwill they had created or forward momentum they had created, not just from a how many runs did they score standpoint because you got shut out, but from the quality of their at-bats are different. Now, he's a guy who pounds the strike zone with good stuff, so you're not going to walk a whole lot against him.
Right.
But he pounds the strike zone. And so to strike out 13 times and take a lot of called strikes like they usually do, I think in particular, Buxton looks and he's streaky. So this is me saying something. He looks as bad as I've ever seen him look. Yeah. And not just in terms of, not getting hits, which he's like 0 for, 25 or something like that. But I mean, he's done that before. He's done that before this season and come out of it. He's just a very streaky player, but just seems to have no real sense of what he wants to do at the plate. He's taking strikes and swinging at everything and fouling everything off. No real solid contact even when he connects.
And that was after a couple of days of break.
Yeah.
You have to clear his head or
he's also
swing or whatever.
His wife is about to give birth to their 3rd child. I think she's scheduled later this weekend maybe or Monday or something. So I'm assuming he's going to take paternity leave at some point, which maybe is some time away. Again, not the worst idea. But they're reaching a point. I think there's a little bit of a window here where they can just kind of keep trying to have him fight through this, assuming he's healthy. Now, I personally don't think he's healthy. I mean, that's not some revelation. He's never healthy. But, I mean, you just watch him even he grounds out and he looks like he's an effort to run to first base. I wonder how much is going on with him and whether there's stuff beyond the knee.
I mean, listen, he's had back problems in the past. He's had all kinds of
problems for a while
in the
now.
Past, right?
I just wonder
things that are listen, a knee by itself could screw up your swing.
Sure,
but back and hip stuff become even more tricky.
Right,
and like you said, his at bats look like he's just not able to hit right now.
Right. He looks like he's up there so that he can say he was up there. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I guess I'll take this at bat now. Like, I don't know. Hopefully I'll get a single somewhere or whatever. I mean, these are just bad at bats, bad process, bad approach, bad outcomes. And, it's different than.
And even on good pitches.
Right. He just
bad
fouls
swings,
them off
right.
or whatever, or he just takes them down the middle. It's very frustrating to watch. And I mean, it's got to be killing him too if it's mostly physical. But I think there's a little bit more leeway here from a time perspective. Like if they just shut him down at this point, I couldn't blame them. Certainly. I think that is a viable option. But the real pressure point would be when Polanco is ready in, 12 days from now or something like that. Because then at that point, you're either, as we talked about a little bit, we can talk more about it. You're either having to take at bats from Julien,
right,
and installing Polanco back at second base, or as Rocco Baldelli kind of hinted but avoided saying really, cementing any plans in place. I think they would be best off in the short term trying to get Polanco to play some third base, which you can leave Julien then at second base.
Right.
But even in that scenario, you don't really have at bats from Matt Wallner. And I don't know that you want to.
Or for that matter, Donovan Solano.
Yeah, although he could play some first base. But yes, and he could play third base a little bit against lefties. They can bench Julien. But yeah,
right.
You're giving up at bats. In any way you slice that up, there are going to be guys losing at bats in that spot or having to play out of position. And with Julien, the defense at second is not good anyway. Although he made a couple nice plays.
Yeah, he did. That one up the middle
including
was nice.
A really nice one yesterday. And, who knows how Polanco would be at third, or it might be a moot point. Maybe he has no interest, and they have no interest in moving to third. We'll see. Polanco played his first defense at AAA on his rehab. He was the DH for the first 2 games, base, but he was at second base. And by the way, he's like 1 for 15 or something like that.
He's not been great.
So we'll see with that. But I think, once you get Polanco back, then you really have a pretty big crunch there in terms of bats. And to me, and I think it sounds like Baldelli and the Twins agree with this, there's just no way at this point you can do anything to Ed Julien that would disrupt what he's doing. He's your best hitter. Mm-hmm. And, I think there are rookies who have come up and had a good month, and we've said this guy's their hottest hitter, and nobody really thinks it will sustain.
Sure.
And I'm not saying he's going to have a 975 OPS for the rest of his life. But what he's doing is not out of character or out of the scouting report. This is largely what we thought he would do, particularly once he could get settled a little bit, which is he's going to grind out great at-bats. He's going to show a lot more power, both pull side and to the opposite field than his frame would suggest. And he's going to be aggressive early in counts when they try to get ahead of him, because then they know he's trying to grind out the at-bats. So if you try to get a first pitch past him for a strike, he's up there hacking on the first and the second pitch too. Yep. And, there's been some luck in his results. I think his batting average on balls in play has got to be well over 400 at this point. He's batting 320 with a high strikeout rate, so you can do the math on that. So that's going to come down too. But just the patience and the power and the ability to drive the ball to all fields. I mean, this is a guy who...
There isn't a lot of luck in walks or home runs or doubles into the gap.
Sure. And even with a 250 batting average, doing what the other stuff he's doing, he's got an 8-something OPS, and he's one of the best hitters on the team. And so we've been hyping him up since spring training. Yeah. Even before that, he had back-to-back monster years in the minors with, huge on-base percentage and walked 100 times a year and all that stuff. But the hype for him really grew throughout Fort Myers spring training, and you could tell Baldelli was very quickly in love with the offensive upside. A lot of their front office guys were talking him up, and it's so easy to see why now. And, look, is he a viable defender at second base? It's borderline. I think it's possible he continues to improve a little bit. It's weird. He seems like the play you mentioned yesterday.
There seems to be a lot of range in what he can do or not do. Right.
This is going to sound absurd, but on some level, the harder the play, the better more competitive he seems within that.
Well, it seems like he's about as good on a hard play as he is on an easy play.
And maybe it's just a matter of hard plays, you're forced to just react, or you're forced to just use your athleticism to try to make the play. Whereas, it seems like the easier the play, and when he has more time to think about it, his throws get double clutched, or they float on him, or he bounces them. I mean, the easier the throw, I don't know if it's some level of the yips or something, but Kirilloff has had to do a lot of sprawling over there to save plays.
Right.
But in general, I don't think
it may just also be he has more trouble moving to his left than to his right.
Yeah, maybe.
I want to try and pay attention to that a little bit more, because it does seem like an awful lot seems to go through the hole between first and second on a regular basis while he's over there. But it's still
although how many second basemen are snagging those balls necessarily? We'd have to look at the positioning on it. But but the larger point there is the Twins seem to recognize that as well. I mean, they know how good Julien is. They've been talking him up for 2 years now. Polanco, they need. If healthy, we'll see.
Right,
We'll see how the rest of this rehab goes. I don't think it's going to be a quick rehab. I mean, they got another 25 days they could keep him down there. Or, no, 15 days they could keep him down there.
I do not think they'll keep him down there 25 days. But
double digits, though.
It might
it's not going to be this upcoming week. I'll be surprised.
I'd be surprised if he's back during this homestand. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, maybe on the road trip, though, next week.
I think, realistically, you probably want to wait till after the trade deadline either way, so you know what your roster situation is post-trade deadline. You don't want to make a move and then undo that move or have to risk losing a player that the roster spot is going to be made available anyway via trade, basically. Anyway, once Polanco's back, they need Polanco. I mean, a healthy or even 90% healthy Polanco is one of their best players too. Yep. I just don't know quite, unless he's going to play third. The other option is why I'm bringing this up connected to Buxton is they just move Julien to DH, leave Polanco at third. At second, excuse me. Right. You continue to play Solano, Farmer, and Castro in some timeshare at third, and then when Royce Lewis comes back, hopefully in about 3 weeks, something like that. I haven't heard a timeline. Hopefully we'll get an update on him later today at the ballpark. But then he can slot back in at third, and then you can start to move those guys around. That's actually a decent scenario, but it just requires making a tough call here on Byron Buxton. But I think they clearly they don't like to do that with Buxton. They like to let him work through this stuff. But this to me is a level beyond what we've seen from him. And maybe this is just because we're in the moment and we're in the middle of this slump. And maybe every time he's 0 for 25 in the past, I've sat here and said something similar. This is the worst I've seen. But when he was slumping a couple weeks ago, it was, oh my God, they robbed him again. The guy
you're right.
Took a homer from him, took a double from him. Oh, he lined out right to the third baseman twice in this game. Like those could have easily been doubles into the corner. That has completely disappeared. I mean, these are not even competitive at bats at this point. And so, part of me thinks shutting him down.
It's a victory when he gets a walk.
Right.
A 10-pitch walk or 12-pitch walk.
He did have a great walk during this.
I know he did. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Was it in Oakland? Yeah, it must have been in Oakland.
I think it might be Seattle, but yeah, keep going.
With the bases loaded. But I don't think at this point we can assume 2 weeks on the IL is going to do much. Like, first of all, he's had 2 weeks on the IL. He came back seemingly worse than when he went on.
Yeah, right. I mean, he didn't look that great just before the IL either. But.
I mean, he hasn't really.
And the weird thing about that one is that was a fastball to the ribs IL trip. Yeah. Now, maybe that's part of what's going on. Maybe we've got we're not hearing about a cracked rib or something like that.
Sure.
Kyle Garlick will tell you about that last year and how much that screwed him up, etc. So it could be that he is just working through something like this, but.
I'm willing to. Yeah, I don't think we need testimony that a cracked rib's bad for a baseball player.
Exactly.
I think we just take that as written. But so I don't know what they're going to do with Buxton. I think they have too many, particularly once Polanco comes back. This will be the case, and really once Lewis comes back. But by the time Lewis comes back, this Buxton thing will have solved itself. I mean, that's a month from now, maybe, or 3 weeks from now. But they have too many between Julien and Wallner and Larnach, and there are other guys here too, Solano, like you mentioned. They have too many guys who have shown themselves to either be a major league caliber hitter in a lineup that doesn't have that many of those, or have the clear upside to be an impact hitter.
Right.
And so most of them are limited to left field, right field, first base, DH. Some of them are just limited to DH, obviously.
Right.
And you can't, it becomes very difficult to just trot Buxton out there, even if you think long-term he's still one of your best players, which I'm willing to believe. but it's not. It's a difference. I think early in the season when it was like, yeah, we're using it Buxton at DH, and who would be the DH anyway at this point? But they have no shortage of DH candidates at this point. I mean, you could just make Julien the DH. You can make Wallner the DH. You could call up Larnach to be the DH. You can make Solano the DH for that matter. Right. Kirilloff, you could make the DH and put somebody else at first base. I mean,
or as we go through trade deadline names.
Well, and that's the other thing. So I'm phrasing this as sort of the Polanco return, but I think that's going to coincide roughly with the trade deadline, which is next Tuesday. Because yes, we'll go through some of the names, and like I said, we went through them detailed name by name and gave kind of pros and cons on everybody on the Patreon for all these hitters. But the vast majority of the hitters that at least you and I think they should be targeting are right-handed, corner outfield, first base types. And for some of those, you want to be playing them left field, right field. They can platoon with Kepler, Gallo, Wallner, those type of guys. Some of them, you go, he could play first base. You move Kirilloff to the outfield, whatever. But some of them, their best position is DH. Like, if you got Teoscar Hernandez from Seattle, I would want to play him at DH probably. He's not a good right fielder. He homered yesterday against the Twins, against a righty though. But so when you're talking about Julien and Wallner and Larnach and Solano internally, and then as you look up at whatever whiteboard they have on some office at Target Field, and they're going, well, that guy, he's okay left fielder, but we could probably play him at DH, right? And it was like, well, yeah, if you're starting to get into 5, 6, 7 options, internal and potentially external, and all of them require some time at the DH spot, and your full-time DH is hitting like 140 over the last 2 months and is looking worse than ever, something has to give here at some point. And I would love for that something to be Buxton's good again. That'd be amazing.
Exactly right.
Because then you can adjust to that. And that's a great problem to have. But I will be so surprised if that's the case, just because if that's the case, if he somehow during this homestand, which he might not even be participating in fully if he leaves, but if he somehow hits a bunch of homers here and has a bunch of good at-bats and he's ripping the ball over the field, I will consider the eye test to be completely meaningless. Do you know what I mean? Because nobody has looked worse.
Yeah, fair.
But instead, if, as I suspect, he continues to struggle.
He is certainly the kind of guy that can, even when he looks at his worst, it can be something like, oh, suddenly he's hot as fire again. Yeah.
No, I mean, the fact that he's 0 for 25 or whatever it is, I mean, that's not good, but it's less worrisome in a weird way for him than it would be for, Alex Kirilloff or even Ed Julien or somebody like that, or Donovan Solano certainly, because he does this. I mean, that's what he does. And then he goes 12 for 25 and you go, okay, all's right in the world. I don't know. And I think they're probably, we saw Baldelli move him down in the order. For the first time, he batted lower than 4th. Now it was 5th. We saw them sit him back-to-back games just as a break in this Seattle series. We haven't, though, seen him start to lose a share of the playing time. We've seen more isolated, he's going to sit today. What we haven't seen is, Julian's the DH twice a week now or something like that, or Wallner's the DH twice a week now. I think that would be the next natural progression to this thing. So, I don't know. It's a bad situation with Buxton, but kind of like the, let's say, Tyler Mahle situation earlier, which was a bad spot for the Twins. They lose one of their best starters for the season in May. Well, the good part is they had Bailey Ober waiting in the wings. They had Louis Varland waiting in the wings, and they had a strong rotation. What's happening with Buxton is not good at all, short-term or long-term, for him or the team. But it's not last year, where last year it was like, well, who do we even call up? It's going to be Mark Contreras or something.
Exactly.
I feel like we crap on Mark Contreras always.
I know that he's doing fine.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Great.
He's a super nice guy. Great mustache.
But
this year it's
probably deserves a shot as a 4th outfielder in the major leagues.
I do think he's probably a major league caliber borderline guy.
4th outfielder.
But now it's, well, who would be the DH? Well, one of these 5 really good young hitters that we think has a future, or Donovan Solano, who's been probably their second best hitter all season. So I do think we're getting to sort of a, S or get off the pot situation, unfortunately, with Buxton. And I think there's going to have to be a tough call here made, and I think it might ruffle some feathers. And I think it's also just going to suck. Like, I think that's because they're committed to him and he's committed to them by way of the contract. He signed a below market contract, to do this. Now, if he's just hurt and physically incapable of being at his best, that obviously changes the scope of the contract or the lens through which you can view the rest of the contract. But he wanted to be here. They wanted him here. And last year, when healthy, he was phenomenal. And really, for the last 3 or 4 years, when healthy, he's been phenomenal.
Right.
That is no longer the case. And I wonder how much of it is...
Is he healthy?
Right. The idea that being a DH, in a weird way, allows him to physically play through stuff that he wouldn't be able to play through when he was a center fielder. And
but not necessarily be able to perform.
Exactly. And so he's on pace for like 130 games, which would be the second most he's ever had by far. But if, hip and knee and back and whatever he's going through and ribs would have not allowed him to play center field, he would have missed many more games. But now he's like, well, I can play because I'm a DH. Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, I could play as a DH. That doesn't. I could go up
Certainly
there.
I could.
Did you see
We've established that.
God. Did you see speaking of guys uncompetitive at bats, and then we'll move on here. Did you see Bryce Harper's at bat? He had yesterday, the day before. So he went up there. I don't know the game. It was like the 7th inning.
The Brewers, right?
Yes. He was facing a lefty. They brought in a lefty to face him.
Yep.
And so and Bryce Harper's a lefty. And so he went up there and he took the whole, how like when it's a 3-0 count, a guy will just kind of put the bat on his shoulder and it's clear from his body language he wouldn't swing even if you rolled the pitch up there. Right. He did that, but for the whole at bat. Like he just went up there with the bat very loosely on his shoulder and looked like he was, he was in the box, but not like in a normal stance or anything. And the guy just threw like 5 pitches and I think struck him out on like 2-2 or 3-2 or something like that. Huh. And it was like one of the weirdest things ever. It was almost like a protest at bat. Huh. And I should look. Maybe there's some story behind it. But anyway, too many of Byron Buxton's at bats have looked like that in the last couple of weeks. So that's the kind of what's on the horizon here. I mean, White Sox coming to town.
White Sox, which followed by Seattle coming to town.
We're going to see Seattle again.
They've got 9 games before the actual trade deadline, because the game on the 1st will be after the trade deadline.
Right. Trade deadline is like mid-afternoon.
So they got 3 versus the White Sox, 3 versus Seattle, and then 3 versus
Kansas City.
I think so. Yeah, it's a bad team. I know that. It's definitely.
How dare you?
It's definitely one of those things where looking at this stretch of games, you want to see them go 6-4, 7-3, something like that.
But they just went 5-2 on
6-4,
5-2 on a road trip, and everybody's furious about that. So those are kind of meaningless.
And they're 2 games ahead of Cleveland now.
Yeah, true.
I watched
Cleveland against Pittsburgh. First of all, Pittsburgh is horrible. The Twins still play Pittsburgh, right? At least once.
That's good. Pittsburgh. Yes.
I mean, my God, are they sloppy? But Cleveland blew a lead against Pittsburgh. They were going to sweep them and then lost yesterday. Or
after
2
being
days ago,
swept.
Not yesterday.
After being swept by the Rangers, they were ready to sweep Pittsburgh and blew it.
I feel like this should be the disclaimer of the beginning of all podcasts. Everything we say about the Twins is true, but also it's true and maybe more so about Cleveland. All the negative things we say,
right.
So that's what's coming up on the homestand. What's coming up on the sort of front of mind decision point is all this stuff with the hitters. They need to, with a week and a half before the deadline, they need to figure out what they're doing with Byron Buxton. They need to figure out what their plan is for when Jorge Polanco comes back, right. Which means what they're going to do with Wallner, what they're going to do with Julien, what they're going to do, with somebody's going to have to go down either way. And then they're going to have to figure out within that, and it's related, what is our approach to the deadline and how many bats could we even really bring in when we can't necessarily even find room for all the bats we have? Now, they're mostly lefty bats, as we've talked about, whereas the ones they would pursue, or at least we think they should pursue, are righties. But it's a weird spot for a team that's not good offensively to be in, which is, how do we find room for all these good bats?
Yeah.
As we rank, 20th out of 30 teams in scoring and OPS and everything. Before we get into a couple more specific stuff, let's talk about our first couple of sponsors here.
We got the homestand starting up. You're going to probably want to go there with some Twins gear on or something kind of Twins related. You can go spend $200 on a jersey for a guy that suddenly you're questioning whether or not you should have given a 6-year contract to, something like that.
How dare you, John?
Or
you can spend $19 on a T-shirt. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly right. You check out Soda Stick. First of all, their designs are kind of classic. Like they've almost always have some sort of inside joke associated with them. We've got we've got a Buck trucking company. Yeah. I'm not sure we're going to want to wear that one.
You didn't plan this one out that well, John.
But the other thing they've got, I think they're going to be releasing this week, is sometimes you just need sort of a generic Minnesota hat, something like that. And they've got these great new Minnesota patch hats, kind of trucker hats out there. I think they look really slick. They do a nice job with their designs. That's why they are so successful. That's why they've been around and selling a crap load of stuff for 8 years now or something with us.
Soda Stick, soda like Minnesota. You go to sodastickco.com or just Google Soda Stick, and whatever you put in your cart, when you check out, put the promo code Gleeman, and you will get 15% off your order at Soda Stick.
Got the Fox 9 Town Ball shirts and all kinds of other stuff. Limited quantities, though, so get out there to sodastick.com.
It's easy for you to say, John.
Yeah.
On this homestand, if you're looking for last minute or hard to find tickets, Game Time app, that's their specialty.
Yep.
Not only for sporting events, but like shows too. John has used it many times while walking to the ballpark.
Right.
Which is
at a bar right next to the ballpark.
I didn't want to talk about your alcoholism on the ad. But so that's the prime example of last minute. You can also use it to find like concert tickets that are tough to find and all that. Says the person who sent his girlfriend to Beyonce last night.
I went and looked a couple days after the Twins are playing in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Bruce is playing. In Philadelphia at Citizen Bank Park. I used the Game Time app to go out there and look at tickets for Bruce.
Game Time app, here's how it works. You just download the Game Time app, you create an account, and you use the code Gleeman, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, Game Time app, redeem the code Gleeman for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay. She was going to Beyonce with her friends last night, and she said, gonna be big boys' night in, huh? Me and the two cats. I was like, oh, yeah, big plans. Because she's like, well, the Twins aren't on because they played in the afternoon.
Right, that's it.
What are you even doing? And then she looked at me, and she thought, Chinese food, and I think you should leave Marathon.
A laser pointer?
And I thought, yeah. No, we don't do that with the cats. We're anti that.
Okay.
I feel it drives them insane. Insane-er.
I was going to say, as opposed to, right.
They love it, but they would do it until they die. Like they would literally pass out doing it, so we don't do it as much. Okay. Let's see. So, I don't know. I mean, we talked about the Julien stuff. I don't want to make it seem like Polanco's impending return should overshadow what Julien is doing. Because what Julien is doing is something you don't often see from any rookie.
It's pretty exciting.
And especially from any rookie with a pedigree that makes you think, oh, this could be mostly for real. I mean, not at this 1,000 OPS level, but as we said. And so, to me, Julien might be their leadoff man for the next 10 years if things go well. And I'm glad to hear, I mean, we'll see it, how it's actually put in motion, but I was pleasantly surprised, maybe not surprised. I was pleased to hear a few days ago when Baldelli told the reporters in Seattle, "Oh, Julian's not going anywhere." Yes. And maybe that seems obvious, and I think it should have been obvious,
right.
But it's not always obvious with teams, and it's not always been obvious with Twins with players in a similar spot. Not to compare Wallner to that, but they sent down Wallner when he had 8 straight plate appearances.
Sure.
They've sent down other young players when veteran players are ready to return from stuff.
Sure.
And I think it's encouraging that Julien has been so good that even they're like, oh, that ain't happening.
Well, and, we've been puzzled by it to some extent ever since spring training. Their insistence that he be solely a second baseman, like almost to the detriment of, for a team that seems to value flexibility so much amongst every other player.
And by the way, he's played everywhere going back to college and his first year of the minors. It's just since last year, exclusively second base. I mean, I asked a couple of their player development people when he was still at AAA this year, hey, is he, playing, I know he's only playing second base during games, but is he playing, first base, left field? And they're like, oh yeah, he's getting reps at first base, to prepare him for that. And I had people say that's probably where he's going to wind up, first base. And then when Julien was first called up here, I think his first day at Target Field, we went over to him and I asked him, like, have they talked to you at all about where you're going to play? And he said, well, I've been playing second base. And I said, but yeah, you take reps at first, right? And he goes, oh yeah, like a lot of pregame reps, blah, blah, blah. And then 5 minutes after that, we went into Baldelli's office and I said, I know Julian's been taking reps. Is he an option at first base? And Baldelli was like, no, not at all. And that's not just Baldelli. It's been consistent since then. And it's strange to me because A, like you said, they like maximum flexibility. And then B, sorry to say, he's not a good second baseman. And so, and Polanco's a better second baseman. Now, is Julien at second and Polanco at third better than Julien at first, putting Kirilloff in the outfield and putting Gallo or somebody on the bench and Polanco at second? I mean, that's debatable, I think.
You are getting to the point where
you're moving 50 different things around. But all of this relies on Polanco being A, willing to play third base, and B, being semi-competent there. Now, from a skill set standpoint, I think third base would fit him decently. But he might not want to. I mean, I haven't talked to him about it, obviously. I haven't seen him. He's been rehabbing, so nobody's talked to him. But, yeah, I don't know. I think...
Well, the other great thing about Julien is, for a guy that is coming up and looks exactly like you wanted him to look, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, it's not just that he's having success. He's having success in exactly the way you kind of thought he was going to be able to have success. This is an 18th round draft pick. We just got through the MLB draft where we were kind of talking about, reasons why you might want to save money on some of the first couple picks because you can spread that money around. He's an 18th round draft pick that they ended up giving, I think $250,000 to or something, way above, sort of the slot at that point with money that they had saved from earlier on in the draft to take a flyer on this guy. Maybe we can get him to sign for $250,000. We've got some money left over. We do and get him higher now than he would end up going next year as a senior in college, and that's all worked out.
Not even a senior, junior would have been. He was a draft eligible.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
Which is why he had leverage. But out of Auburn, he has. I think yesterday was his 49th game, so today will be his 50th game.
Okay,
and I looked it up, and assuming. I mean, even if he goes 0 for today, he will have the second best OPS in the history of the Twins through 50 career games behind Tony Oliva. And the unfortunate thing for all present and future Twins rookies is it's going to be real tough to knock Oliva off of that spot because he hit like 400 through 50 games.
Did he win the MVP that year?
He won Rookie of the Year, and then I think he won the MVP the next year.
Maybe. Yeah, it was around that time.
Go back and look at the beginning of Tony Oliva's career. It's absurd.
Yeah.
He's certainly the best hitter I say hello to every day at Target Field. Justin Morneau probably second on that list, and then John Bonas third when he's in the press box. Miranda feels like it was about 3 years ago when he went on the IL, but that's happened since we last spoke. More shoulder problems for him. They're calling it a shoulder impingement, which just basically means the shoulder hurts.
Right.
That's not like a specific, there's no tear or anything, which is good. The bad news, though, is that started bothering him when he reported to spring training, basically. And he didn't play third base for the first several weeks of spring training. And then he didn't hit at all once the season started, went back to AAA, didn't really hit that well, hit for okay average, but not much power. Came back, got a dozen at-bats with the Twins before going back on the shelf. Certainly didn't look good in those dozen at-bats, but whatever. And I just wonder, we're talking about right-handed bats that they could go get. It's just weird that compared to where he was 1 year ago at this time, when he was might have been their best hitter right now, middle of the season last year. And now it's like, well, they need to go get some corner right-handed bats.
Yep.
And it's like, well, he's not even in the picture. Now, part of that is the injury. Part of it is just he's played so poorly.
And how much the two are related, I think, should be an open question at this point. Now, we watched him try to work through that shoulder soreness at the time. I'm not sure exactly if it's any different or the same as what he was dealing with back in spring training. And at that point, the talk was, well, he can't play third base, but he can still hit. And he was crushing the ball in spring training.
Right.
So, how much the fact that he's got this shoulder issue, is it affecting his hitting as well as, or could he just not play in the field and therefore they put him on the IL? I don't know.
So his going on the IL brought back Wallner, which is funny that we kept for months. It was like, what veteran left-handed hitter is they're going to part ways with to make room for Wallner. Instead, it was a right-handed hitting third baseman who made room for Wallner. Although, as we saw in the Seattle series and he came up and didn't even play the first 2 games of the Oakland series that he was with the team. There's no room. There's no spot for him. Right. And that goes back to the Buxton DH thing, but it's also, you have Gallo in left. You have Kepler in right. You have Kirilloff, who also plays the outfield, and they also use Willie Castro there as a left-handed bat. There's just no room for a left-handed corner bat at this point, which goes back to what we were talking about before. And that's not even getting into like Larnach, who hit a 450-foot homer for St. Paul yesterday too. He's been passed by Wallner, which in itself is kind of noteworthy because early in the season they called up Larnach twice instead of Wallner. Yep. And then Larnach got hurt and got sent back down. But so, how do you solve that logjam now or next week at the deadline? Something's got to give. There's no way to solve it.
If Polanco comes back up, it's obvious that Wallner's probably the odd man out at this point. I mean, if that was going to happen today, that's where it would be.
Yes.
We'll see what happens in a week. You never know who's going to be.
Probably.
What's going to happen then.
I mean, I wonder, they will never do this, but I wonder if they would be better off going to 12 pitchers for a while. The starters have not been as good of late, but the number of times you've needed bulk innings from Cole Sands as the last guy in that bullpen have been pretty minimal. And given how often Baldelli now is making in-game roster or lineup moves, pinch hitting, pinch running, defensive replacements, he's going nuts with that.
Yeah.
And having an extra left-handed bat on the bench would be pretty useful. Down the stretch, is Matt Wallner as a part-time starter and bat bench available so that you could pinch hit Donovan Solano for Joey Gallo, and then if they brought in a righty the next time up, you could turn to Wallner again and have him play the outfield. Is that more valuable than a 8th reliever? They will never do. Once they go to 13, they would go to 16 pitchers if the rules allowed them to.
Potentially,
I'm pretty certain.
I feel this kind of the same way. Looking at with their bullpen situation with 2 guys at the top, and then a whole bunch of question marks after that. How many question marks do you need in the bullpen?
Well, right.
It's, on the one hand, I felt like they needed Sonny Gray to go deep on Monday, and he didn't. And so therefore they ran out of bullpen arms early on and basically turned that game into a non-competitive game. So, on the one hand, I'm kind of like, well, they certainly still do need bullpen. They totally used theirs up in Oakland, but what they really used up in Oakland were the top 2 guys, and
we used to talk about this a lot during the Molitor era,
right?
Which is, you can give, because back then it was like, how can they go from 11 to 12 on the pitching staff back then, it was the old ages. It was, 8 years ago. But the problem that we used to talk about with Molitor is, you could give him 1,000 relievers. Right. He's still going to just use the closer and the 2 setup man every other day.
When you took a look at they went into that Seattle series gassed in their bullpen, and when you take a look at the bullpen, pitch chart that we have in Twins Daily at the game recap every day, you said, well, yeah, they can't use any of the first 6 guys in the bullpen, but there's still 2 guys that haven't pitched in a week.
Right.
Well, do you need to carry 2 guys that aren't going to pitch in a week?
Yeah, it feels
now, one of them is Jorge Lopez. So you probably...
They also, by the way, we talked about Buxton. He's in a similar spot for obviously different reasons.
Right.
But first of all, twice now since he's come back.
Except with Jorge Lopez, they don't keep batting him 3rd in the order. They've been having him sit down in the back.
But he's come into 1-run games twice and made them not 1-run games.
Well, that's true.
Both in the last 10 days. The thing I don't get about Jorge Lopez is, he goes on the IL for mental health reasons, takes a minimum 15-day break, comes back. They clearly wanted to avoid using him in key spots, but the spots, kind of like the Emilio Pagán discussions of months and years past, where if it's all close games being played, there aren't low leverage spots. There are just sort of medium leverage spots, and that's where he ended up getting used. And then twice, once at home and then yesterday, he got through a clean first inning. And
then they come back.
And then you come back to him and you just let him fall apart. And that's on him. I mean, pitching a second inning for a male reliever is not like some insurmountable task. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, that's a fair
point. But
I'm
saying, why not just have him have the clean inning? Because then what happened? Well, what happened was he plunked 2 guys. He gave up a homer. And then you had to warm up Cole Sands to come in to
get the last out anyway.
Mop-up.
Right. Yeah.
Well, why didn't you just have Cole Sands pitch that inning anyway?
Right.
I don't understand with the guy you're clearly trying to tread lightly with from a usage standpoint and a mental health standpoint and a confidence standpoint, let him leave on a high note.
Yeah.
Like, let him have a clean inning, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know,
well, especially
pat him on the back and say, that was great, man. Go home tonight and think about how well you did, as opposed to, well, we need a second inning. Why? Why do you need a second inning? Why not just Cole Sands?
Like you said, a really fair criticism of how Baldelli has been using Lopez. Yeah, you're right. That's happened a couple times. That's a really good point.
Unfortunately, yesterday's was pretty bad.
Yeah.
And he's not pitched particularly well, obviously, since coming off the IL. It's only a handful of appearances or whatever, but this is kind of what we're getting to with the bullpen, which is, you know, and unless or until Brock Stewart and or Caleb Thielbar come back,
right,
which neither of them have started a rehab assignment.
And we haven't gotten any updates on them after getting one, 2 weeks ago.
Emilio Pagán's your third most trusted reliever at this point. And that sounds bad. I will give Emilio Pagán some credit here. He's looked really good for the last several weeks, maybe a month now.
I did check the other day after his clean outing. He still had a negative WPA.
But it's not the worst on the team anymore.
No, it's not.
It's like fourth worst. Lopez, I'm assuming, is the worst on the team. Right. But for pitchers, it's basically Duran, Jax, Pagán at this stage. Yeah, and then you're, Balazovic, Ortega are getting some usage and stuff. And Moran, obviously, from the left side. But yeah, you have a 13-man pitching staff, which means you have an 8-man bullpen, except Lopez is unusable in anything, really. Mm. Sands is just your kind of break glass in case of emergency. I wonder, to me, having an 8-man bullpen where 3 or 2.5 are trustworthy is so much more preventative. Like, we just want to avoid a situation where the starter leaves so early and we just wreck the whole pitching staff. Right. Versus having an extra bat that you could use, especially given how Baldelli's been deploying people mid-game, seems more, aggressive, or you're the one kind of making the decision as opposed to we're just going to have in reserve here. And, by the way, today, I'm fairly certain, is Dallas Keuchel's opt-out at AAA. And he's looked pretty good for the Saints. And so maybe they'll work something out where he stays at AAA, or
maybe they swap him out for Cole Sands as a long reliever.
I think they would probably give him a start, push people back in the rotation, and then figure out the next turn what they want to do with him. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've only watched video of Keuchel, and he's so tough to evaluate. I mean, he was tough to evaluate when he was winning Cy Young because he was throwing 91 miles an hour. Now he's throwing 88. Normally, I would say, well, who cares? He's a washed-up guy throwing 88, and that may very well be true, but he has had success throwing 89 in the last 3 years.
Well, and, I mean, this team could use a long reliever that they have some confidence can actually do long relief no matter what is going on, that they don't have to worry about you can't put Jorge Lopez into that role, in part because you just think he's going to melt down, right? You can't put Cole Sands into that role because Cole Sands also has these. He can go 2 1/3, 3 innings and look pretty good. He can also go 3 innings or an inning and 2/3 and get lit up for 4 home runs.
But that's the point of that role. It doesn't matter,
right?
So I just it's not that.
But you're not going to. I mean, Keuchel's enough of a veteran that you're like, well, whatever. Just.
Well, I mean, it's possible he doesn't want to pitch, or they don't want to pitch him as a reliever at all. In which case, it's not the end of the world if you lose him. But that is going to be a decision point. If not today, sometimes they work out deals where they push back the date so that gives them a little more time to make a decision or see how the rotation shakes out or whatever. But that's something to watch too. Let's see. I had one other. And of course, obviously, we mentioned this, but, Kepler playing center field would do some things too. But funny, you don't see that. It's weird. Like, we've talked about this a while, and I've written and said on here that it's my understanding that Kepler has over the years made it clear to the Twins that he has a strong preference not to play center field. And I think people take that as he stormed into somebody's office and said, if you do this, I'll retire. That's certainly not the case. But if a player isn't comfortable playing somewhere, you're not going to play him, and the proof is in the pudding. He hasn't played there since, I think, mid-2021. They've played a dozen different center fielders.
I mean, it used to be that he felt like he wore, or they felt like somebody felt like he got worn down in center field.
I think he does feel that way, which, yeah, that's fine. And he's been really good in right field for the most part. He's a great right fielder. But, it's different when we're talking about, A, they're not getting much production from center field as is, and B, this logjam of lefty bats, you could stick Kepler in center and stick Wallner in right.
Yeah, right.
Or, you could stick Kirilloff in right and play Solano at first. And so that would solve some things, but that's not going to happen. I think that ship is probably
coming
sailed.
off of the Seattle series. Somebody had tweeted me something about what I think about trading Kepler straight up for Teoscar Hernandez. And you take a look at that.
I'll drive him to the airport on that deal. Why would you not do that?
I thought, but would Seattle do that?
No, I don't think so. Why do they need that? Like, why is he better? Why is he better?
See, I don't know enough about Seattle, but their point was they need some left-handed bats versus in the same way that we're about to go through some of the trade deadline talk. I promised to God we're going to talk about we'll throw some batters' names out there, but one of the things that we're going to talk about is that Twins don't necessarily need to go. Listen, we're not opposed to them going and exploring and trying to get a high-impact Hall of Fame level type bat, right? Sure. But they can also just make some incremental improvements just by changing the mix in the outfield a little bit with a right-handed corner hitting outfielder.
If they could just
I wonder if Seattle's the same way for the lefty.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Seattle. They do have a lot of righty bats, so maybe you're right. But if the Twins could just make some sort of potion and give them to one of their left-handed hitters and make them a right-handed hitter, like Matt Wallner being a right-handed hitter would solve the same things. Like Joey Gallo being a right-handed hitter. Right. I mean, that's a little complicated, but we could get there must be some formula for that, right?
I think how baseball ops has done some research. I don't think they found it yet.
Like maybe this is just in movies where like somebody will get hit on the head or they'll go in a coma and they'll wake up and they'll be fluent in a language they've never spoken before. Yeah, they'll be like, I speak French now perfectly. Like maybe that's what it needs to happen.
That's right.
How do we make Trevor Larnach wake up and be right-handed tomorrow? Like what needs to occur? That would be very easy. But yeah,
I'm sure he would do it. Whatever it is, like
you don't see a lot of lefty for righty swap. Like those are called challenge trades, major leaguer for major leaguer. Right. I think a lot of times if you were to trade a player like Kepler, or if you're Seattle and you trade a player like Hernandez, veteran outfielder essentially on a 1-year deal, it would be for like prospects usually, or if you're going to trade major leaguer for major leaguer, it'd be like for a reliever or something like that. To trade like one right fielder for another right fielder is very rare.
I know,
but
in some ways, that's kind of break. You have to worry about figuring out the roster move that you need to do. Like, are we going to have to cut Kepler anyway? Are we going to cut Gallo? What are we doing? True. Right? Like, it frees something up on both sides.
Unsaid, as we talk about some names here, is anyone they add, even if it's Polanco, and a few weeks from now, if it's Royce Lewis, needs to bump someone off the roster, particularly if they're sticking with a 13-13 split with pitchers and hitters. Which goes back to what we just talked about. But, it's not super easy to find bumpable people. Like you said, if Polanco comes back, probably it'll be Wallner.
But after that,
when Royce Lewis comes back, or if they add somebody in trade, who would it be? I think the assumption, or at least my assumption is, if they're going to add a corner outfield bat of some significance, they can't have the same outfielder group.
That's right.
Like somebody has
either Gallo or
go.
Kepler is going. Right. And the point is, if you're just trading away Kepler,
that's
not bad.
You're not going to get
easy swap.
A veto from me on that.
Yeah. I mean, they're coming to town this week. They just swap jerseys and
let's do it.
Take care of.
How about just one game? We see how it does, and we'll reevaluate like a test drive. The other guy the most optionable guy is Willie Castro. But he's reached cult hero status, and Baldelli loves him. And
I wonder with Royce Lewis coming back if that ends up being
we're giving him all this credit, by the way, for going with staying with Julien, which hasn't been proven yet, but we're assuming. Watch Royce Lewis comes back, they option him and keep Willie Castro. It'll be a hell of a thing. Okay, so let's, like we said, we're going to talk hitters here for a second, or trade deadline targets hitters. If you want like a full discussion of all these names, like literally and more, then I'm going to list here. I'm going to list like 8 here. We went through pros and cons, what it might cost, contractual status, all that stuff for all these guys on
alternate
the Patreon.
Names that we're not going to talk about, all kinds of stuff. We went through each of the big heavy hitters that are on the free agent market, how they might tie or how they might not tie to us.
Patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love you to have you join us. I think as of this morning, we have our high water mark for subscribers ever. On Patreon.
How many are we at?
Almost 4,000, 3730 or something like that.
Great.
So I'd like to get to 4,000. I'd like to get to 10,000 and I just retire from everything else.
When they trade for Paul Goldschmidt, I'm sure we'll get up to 4,000.
So Goldschmidt's near or at the top of this list. I think we both kind of feel similarly in that. Let me try to boil down our take on what they should be trying to do at the deadline from a lineup standpoint. I think we mostly agree on this. Tell me if I'm wrong. Which is, if you can pull off some big, massive deal that you think is good value for, I don't know, Juan Soto, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. By the way, Goldschmidt and Arenado have no trade clauses. Arenado has $100 and something million left on his contract. So that's
he's under contract through 2026.
Throw in, I don't know, Shohei Ohtani if you want, and on and on. All the true biggest
Pete
Alonso, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, kick the tires on that. Make calls on that. If something presents itself, don't be afraid to do that. But I think in terms of what would make the kind of the most bang for the buck, to me would be a competent, average or above average, but non-superstar level, right-handed hitting, corner outfield, first base type of guy. And, like Michael Kadire in his prime would be like the ideal trade.
He might be too high.
Yeah, he honestly might be too high. Right.
But
that's the stylistically.
Kadire not in his prime.
Right. Michael Kadire today, who still looks pretty good. I saw him. Where did we see him? I don't know. He's coaching Team USA. He just coached Walker Jenkins.
Yeah.
Called him Captain America. We talked about that. That type of player, a guy who, if you play him every day, he's a good player, but not a great player. But if you play him half the time against righties and 100% of the time against lefties, he's going to put up some pretty good numbers because he'll knock the piss out of lefties. I like that in my head. I thought, don't swear. And so it's not that adding a player like that will have a bigger overall impact than adding a Paul Goldschmidt or a Juan Soto or a Shohei Ohtani. Right. Obviously, that's not the case. Those are superstar players. But if those guys cost you $100 to get and the right-handed hitter costs you $8 to get, then you might be getting more value and a better fit or a more seamless fit with less future prospect capital sacrificed, which they don't have a ton of to sacrifice.
And we're not saying you have to stop there.
Sure.
Right? We're saying go get that because it's a bargain. It's an easy thing to do.
It's plentiful. There's always more supply than demand.
In the same way that getting a competent but not, closer level reliever is something you should be able to pick up at the trade deadline. I'd actually suggest, given the fact that we're still not hearing anything on Stewart and Thielbar, we probably will get an update today at the ballpark. Yeah. But I would suggest maybe even take a look for two of those guys, right? So there's 2 or 3 players right there that you just need to go and check those boxes because they're not going to cost you anything more than like a number 12 prospect in your system.
Right. Or they shouldn't.
Right.
I mean, those deals can come back to burn you too, but just theoretically, go get a good, competent right-handed bat with some power and at least 1 or maybe 2, maybe 1 from each side reliever. So we're going to focus right now on the hitters because that's what we discussed on the Patreon last time. We keep mentioning Goldschmidt.
But before we do that, though, let's get to the sponsor.
Okay, our last sponsor. It'll be a quick one. BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com. The way BetterHelp works is it's online therapy. Whatever you need to talk to somebody about in your life and you've been thinking about it, it can be a hassle to go through all the steps required to see somebody in person. Yeah. From an insurance standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, maybe you've got some social anxiety and you just don't want to see somebody in person. You can do a video call on BetterHelp, usually within 72 hours with a real licensed therapist. If you don't even want to be on video, you can just do a phone call. And if you're a weirdo like me and you hate being on the phone, you can just do a live chat with them. They will tailor it to whatever your comfort level is. It's, like I said, real licensed therapists.
You can also switch therapists. If it's not working for you, it's easy enough to switch. All the barriers that happen because that you face when you're trying to get therapy melt away when you go to BetterHelp.com.
And here's the deal that we have for Gleeman and the Geek listeners. You can visit BetterHelp.com/Gleeman and you will get 10% off your first month to give it a try. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gleeman. All right. So we keep mentioning Paul Goldschmidt because he's the reigning National League MVP. Any, reasonably hardcore baseball fan knows him. He's, I think, a 7-time All-Star.
He's a great freaking fit for this team.
Right.
As well.
He's a future, I would say, deserving of a Hall of Fame. I don't know that he'll get there counting stats-wise. And over the last 3 years, and my guess is for the last 10 years, I didn't look at that though, he has literally the highest OPS in baseball against left-handed pitching. Although this year he hasn't crushed left-handed pitching, but it's like 70 at-bats or whatever. But he's made a career. I mean, he's a great right-handed hitter, and the thing great right-handed hitters do is knock the piss out of left-handed pitching. And so, is he as good as Shohei Ohtani? No. Right. Is he as good this year as Juan Soto? Maybe not. He's 35 years old. He's less good than he was winning the MVP last year. But just in terms of like a seamless fit that would do the most to improve the weakest spot that the Twins have, which is versus left-handed pitching. Right. You could not invent a guy who would do better than that. Now the problem with
they have an opening at first base, and that they can move Kirilloff to the outfield, etc.
Now the problem with Goldschmidt is a couple things. One,
there's several problems with Goldschmidt.
Yeah, he has a no trade clause,
right?
And he's got the rest of this year and then one more year on the long term extension he signed with the Cardinals. He came up with Arizona, then got traded to the Cardinals, and then signed re-upped with the Cardinals. It's possible he just has no interest in going anywhere. He's 35 years old. He's the reigning MVP. He's probably 3 years from retirement, and going to get his jersey retired maybe by 2 teams. And what does he want to move? Even if he's willing to waive the no trade clause. The Cardinals, who, by the way, have won 7 in a row now.
Yeah.
They're still like
a lot better.
10 games back or something.
That's right.
All indications from the Cardinals, this is like their first truly bad season in like 15 years.
They were supposed to be a lot better. They were supposed to be contending for the NL Central.
They're always.
Right.
They're one of the more consistently good teams.
That's right.
There's a sense, I think, that, yes, they're going to trade guys because this season's been a disaster for them. But most of the guys they're going to trade are the impending free agents or the guys they've kind of soured on.
Guys that they aren't going to be on the 2024 team anyway. And in fact, what the Cardinals general manager has come out and said is, we are looking towards 2024. He didn't say we're rebuilding.
Right.
He said we're looking towards 2024. And it turns out Paul Goldschmidt's under contract for 2024.
I mean, if you're truly thinking of just reloading and putting a division-winning caliber team on the field next season, you would never trade Paul Goldschmidt or, for that matter, Nolan Arenado. Right. So it's possible this is a moot point, and the Twins make one call and they find out, well, that ain't happening, and then they can move on with the rest of their lives. Right. They may have already determined that, obviously.
Right. Yes.
But if it's not a moot point and he is open, if they're open to trading him and he's open to waiving the no-trade clause, well, he has to be at the top of your list.
Right.
Just in terms of overall quality, I think contractually it's a decent fit.
$25 million next year or something like that.
For an all-star caliber first baseman on a one-year deal, essentially, at that point, is great. Right. By the way, could give him the qualifying offer after that, although he'll be 37 at that stage. But
has he not had the qualifying?
Because he hasn't been a free agent.
Oh, okay.
So, what's that going to cost? Well, it's a lot because the Cardinals, as we just talked about, they have leverage just in the fact that they don't really feel like they have to move him. Right. Do you want to trade, Brooks Lee or Emmanuel Rodriguez or one of your few high-end remaining prospects for 1.5 seasons of a 35-year-old first baseman who also will cost you $25 million next year? I don't know about that. I mean, if you're going to try to make a push this year, it's going to be hard to find a more impactful player that you could add, short of a true superstar, Ohtani or whatever, than Paul Goldschmidt. It's one of those where you should look into it.
Yep.
Cost-wise, no trade, how the Cardinals are viewing things, it might be one of those things where you just go, whatever.
Right.
The second name that I think we both agreed on as like this guy's a level above the rest of the field is not a right-handed hitter, but is a left-handed hitter, Cody Bellinger. Right. And the reason he would be the only lefty I would go for here, and then we're going to read a sea of righties after this, is that he can play center field. And he's a former MVP who had a bad shoulder injury in the playoffs, and the past 2-3 years has not been good and has been hurt. Signed a 1-year, $17 million deal with the Cubs and has bounced back in a huge way.
It's been a great make-good deal.
I mean, he's been phenomenal. Maybe not quite at the MVP level, but certainly at the All-Star Plus level. And he would just be such a huge upgrade as your everyday center fielder.
Right.
And handles lefties fine. I mean, he's not an asset necessarily against left-handed pitchers, but he still has power against lefties. Go. I mean, the Cubs are going nowhere. He's on a 1-year deal. The problem there is they can make him the qualifying offer, I think. Any deal you would have to give for even a 2-month rental would need to essentially beat a late first round pick, which is going to be a little bit tricky. But I think he would be a massive upgrade
unless he really fades in the second half and the shoulder starts acting up again or something like that.
He'll get
he will get the qualifying offer.
He was terrible last year, and they gave him a 1 year, $17 million deal. So why would they not give him a 1 year, $20 million deal coming off a much better season?
You would think so.
Other than those two, I'll just read these guys and we'll clump them all together, basically, because there's some you like more than others. There's some who are.
Let me throw one more than tie in. I still think Pete Alonso is somebody that they might. He's the Mets' first baseman. He's not a great fit for the Twins in that he's the new batting approach that they want to try and do. He's very much the old batting approach, and that he's just going to hit a bunch of home runs and hit 220, something like that, is what he's doing next year. But he's also, by a whole bunch of home runs, I mean, he's going to be 45, 50 home runs. He's also under team control for one more year. He's going to make, I don't know. Actually, no, he's under contract for next year as well for $14, $15 million. The Mets are, trying to figure out whether or not they are going to buy or sell.
They're not.
They're not going to buy.
We've already spent too much time on Pete Alonso. First of all, they're not trading Pete Alonso. Second of all, Pete Alonso's been terrible and is hurt. And
he's hurt right now?
Well, he's hit 140 since he came back from a shoulder injury. So I don't think they're going to trade him. But yes, Pete Alonso would be up there too. Okay, so here's a group of right-handed hitting corner bats, basically. Teoscar Hernandez, who we just mentioned from the Mariners. Tyler O'Neill, also from the Cardinals. Right. Lane Thomas from the Nationals, Hunter Renfroe from the Angels, Tommy Pham from the Mets, although he just left yesterday's game with some sort of injury. I haven't seen an update on that. Andrew McCutchen on the Pirates. And then, Jeimer Candelario, who's different. He's a third base, first base switch hitter. But those are, I think, the sort of second tier of bats. And honestly, throw a rock and whoever you hit, the Twins would be in good position if that's who they added.
Right.
If you
Which
trade,
is what part of what makes them appealing, right? Is that you can sort of wait and see if there's enough other options out there that you don't have to give a lot to get one of these.
Right.
Guys.
I mean, there's legitimately, and there's other names, similar names. I'd view a half step below those, another 3 or 4 guys we can talk
or that
about.
are on teams that we think are probably going to keep them. Right.
But I mean, there's 6, 8, 10 of these type of just a good solid right-handed hitting corner outfielder. There's maybe going to be a dozen true buyers, and how many of them need right-handed hitting corner outfielders? Maybe half of them. So just from a musical chair standpoint, supply and demand.
But none of them are giving up a huge bounty for them, right? This is something that there is a bin of them, and you can, and from a supply-demand standpoint, you can afford to kind of wait back and wait the market out and grab the one that.
I mean, some of these guys, O'Neill's through next season. Yeah, Lane Thomas has got true. 2 more years.
That's true.
They're going to be a little more expensive, but if that's the case, then just move on. Ramon Laureano's in there, Connor Joe's in there. You could add more names. I like Joe Adell from the Angels, but that's more of a kind of buy low, post hype prospect situation. But yeah, I mean, to me, someone like Hunter Renfroe would be the ideal target. Not because I think he's the best player they could possibly get, but just because he's a 2-month rental from an Angels team that clearly should be selling. He's a 29, 30-year-old guy, proven big power, great arm, mediocre outfielder. Just a kind of prototypical big number 5 type of hitter that you can plug in there against all the lefties, and he's going to knock around lefties. You can, if needed, play him against some righties or all righties, and he's going to at least hold his own enough. And it's just not conceivable that he would cost that much for 2 months of a slightly above average starting right fielder or left fielder from a team that's going nowhere. He's not going to be a qualifying offer guy. And so that's not it. And so, to me, like trading your, I won't say any names, but like trading your 12th best prospect for Hunter Renfroe or for, I don't know, Teoscar Hernandez is probably even a level above him, but that type of player, or even like a Tommy Pham if healthy. Right. Although Tommy Pham's nuts, so you're going to want to consider that too. Google, if you don't know Tommy Pham, Google Tommy Pham fantasy football, and you'll just you can read the rest of your life. You can read those stories and be amazed.
Or just Tommy Pham crazy.
Yeah, or just Tommy Pham. But he can hit, and that to me is kind of what we're talking about. Of like, is that shooting? is that aiming as high as you can aim at the deadline? No. But to check that box is both the most essential thing you can do and the biggest upgrade you can easily do. And so that's why we went over the pros and cons of these guys already on the Patreon. But to me, get somebody from that bucket, basically. Whoever, I'm not even saying the cheapest guy, like the guy who costs the least, but I'm just saying like the one that balances, we like this guy and also we like the price tag.
Yeah, that's right.
So, maybe it's the third best guy you like, but that's
I would compare it to, listen, you want to go shopping for an SUV. There's a lot of SUVs that are a little bit alike.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't necessarily get the cheapest one. You might get the one that's got a little bit of extras. You might pay a little bit extra for it. Just get something that you make sure that you like, that is going to do what you want, and
when you're driving
pay the price.
A 2012 Honda Fit, anything looks like an upgrade. Well, that's where the twins are at. They're driving a 2012 Honda Fit versus left-handed pitchers. Hunter Renfroe looks like a nice, shiny new SUV. Tommy Pham, whatever.
Have you thought about taking the advice that you're giving to the twins yourself when it comes to your ride?
Oh, I will not be driving my car this winter. So sometime between now and first snowfall, all right. If there are any car dealers out there who want to give me a car, I'll plug. We've never had a car dealer advertise. You would think they would.
We almost did a
lease one out to me, and we can talk about it on the show. There's an easy advertiser.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Think how much. This car's great. Blah blah blah. I parallel parked it. You should get it too. Boom! You sold 10 cars just for giving me one.
For sure. Yeah,
do it.
That'll work.
Watch, some Honda Fit dealer is going to reach out. Now I know this isn't ideal for you, but anyway, Luther Honda. That's where I got this steaming pile of parts.
I like how the car dealer to you sounded a little bit like Sid Hartman.
Oh, that's the only impression I do. This is a dumb old slow person. It's the same impression Becky does of me. What time are the twins on? It's her impression of me.
That is not very Sid Hartman.
Do you want? If I get Chinese, do you want wontons? That's her impression of me. That's truly her impression of me.
It's not bad.
It's probably the number one sentence I say. I'm probably going to get Chinese. Do you want wontons if I get it? That's my favorite. Okay. Let's finish up here.
That's like Aaron Gleeman if he's from like the Connecticut.
Yeah. If only. I've been to Connecticut.
That's what that sounded like. Like, I'm going to the Hamptons. Do you want wontons?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, if I mix in... But I'm hesitant to do that because you're really the modern Sid in terms of throat clearing.
Well, that's probably
on
true.
Audio recordings.
That's probably true.
Yeah. Let's finish on. I would say Connecticut. Let me think. The fifth on my days spent in states list. I would say lifetime Connecticut.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
NBC. That's where they offer.
Oh, okay. Well, you didn't go there for very long.
A couple weeks.
Right? Really? You were there for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, twice for a week, and then also a couple other times. Right. I think the rank in the top 5, since I know people are on the edge of their seats now, Minnesota,
Florida.
Yeah, Wisconsin, I would say.
Huh. When did you ever spend in Wisconsin other than visiting?
I got other relatives there, too. I spent used to go to summer camp in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. All right.
For weeks at a time.
Okay.
But actually, I think it's Arizona is second. Because like 10 years in a row, I went to Arizona for spring training or Arizona Fall League for like 10 days at a time. Huh. So I might have 100 days in Arizona. So that it's either in some order, Minnesota, Arizona, Florida, Wisconsin, Connecticut.
Maybe Connecticut comes in at the end.
Yeah. Right. And then this boardroom, if it were its own state, would probably be number 2.
All
right. Okay. Let's finish with the hodgepodge of just notes here that I have. Connor Prelip. Last year's second-round pick from Alabama, who the reason they got him in the second round was that he was recovering from Tommy John surgery. Right. Was before that viewed by some as a potential number 1 pick and by almost everyone as a top 10 prospect in last year's class.
Right.
They got him with like the 40th pick or whatever. Mm-hmm. Ended up pitching twice this year. In his comeback, was shut back down recently, and then had a second surgery, not the full Tommy John, but the one where they put the internal brace in, basically. So he'll miss the rest of this season, and I'm assuming at least the beginning of last year. This is the downside. Everybody loves a high upside draft pick.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Everyone loves. Well, Randy Moss dropped to the Vikings at number 20, and look how it turned out. Right. Well, there's also versions of that where it doesn't turn out.
There are reasons where they drop, and it's called risk.
And that's not to say Connor Prelip has no potential,
right?
And might come back fine from this. But by the time he comes back in the middle of next year, or even early in next year, let's say
next year,
no, because it's not the full 12-month thing.
Full thing?
But
it's the second
he
time
will have
around.
thrown roughly 10 innings in the last 3 years at that point. So now the good news is, in spring training he was throwing, and then he pitched, like I said, a couple times in the low minors this year, and everyone who saw him was like, "Oh my God, 97 with the fastball, great slider." Good changeup. Now we'll see how he comes back from the second
When
surgery.
they give you the injury updates today,
Yeah.
can I ask that you ask about Chris Paddock?
Sure, there isn't going to be much on him.
I don't think so, but
yeah,
we are getting to the point where they...
Sure, it's going to be a long injury update from Dr. Dustin. Doc Rock is not even applicable at this point. Doc Rock is sick.
Dustin gives the injury updates?
Yeah,
I thought it was Derek usually gave the
Well, we'll
updates
see if he
lately.
wants to talk in more depth, but Dustin basically reads us the internal email.
Okay.
Not the details of it, but we say,
Right.
what's the deal with so-and-so? And he goes, okay, let me check. Well, he worked out yesterday and blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Because Doc Rock got sick of it.
Yes.
I mean, was
Yes.
always sick of it.
Right,
But after last year,
Well, the problem with Doc Rock doing it
is he's not a doctor, and he is not, in terms of attention to detail, that's not where his mind is focused on.
Right. It shouldn't be. But I'll give another one. It's that you can ask him that every day.
Well, that's what he gets sick of.
Yeah, I mean, it's that if they have somebody else do it, like Derek Falvey or somebody else, it's once every homestand I give you an update. Here's all the updates.
Right.
You know.
Yes, Baldelli got very much sick of just running through 10 names every day.
It's the same thing I said 2 days ago.
Right.
You just weren't here.
And a lot of times
Right.
he'll be like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. His thing now, and I kind of agree with him, especially once the injuries start piling up, is until a guy is at the point where he's cleared for a rehab assignment, I don't need to know what's going on.
Right.
Like, the manager of the Twins does not need to know about Chris Paddock's rehab until Chris Paddock is days away from beginning a rehab assignment, in which case you can start to kind of map out.
I don't care whether this player's coming back in a month or 2 months.
Right.
In terms of, it's not going to alter my strategy or my lineup at all today.
Like with
right?
Royce Lewis.
Right.
If I ask Baldelli today about Royce Lewis, he will. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but he will most likely say, "I have no idea. He's in Fort Myers and he's working, and when he's close to a rehab, they'll let me know." That's roughly what you'll hear. Let's see. We talked about Kirilloff showing some power. 3 homers in 4 games.
Yeah,
all of them to the opposite field. Very good to see. He's up to like a 8-something OPS, which is great.
We had a long discussion on Kirilloff on the Patreon, so on Monday.
I gave Emilio some credit, but I'll do it a second time because that's fair.
Yeah.
Given how I've talked about him for the last year and a half. Pitching very well, and not only pitching well, but pitching well in a spot where they desperately need him.
Yep.
Because without Brock Stewart and without Caleb Thielbar.
Well, I mean, one of our narratives about him has been he thrives in low leverage situations, looks really good for low, but as soon as you get him into a high leverage situation, he tends to struggle, and he's at least shown a little bit of success in some high leverage situations.
He was pulling people away. 97, 98 last time out, looked great. Let's see. We talked about Jorge Lopez. Same thing. Kepler has been very good now. For it's funny, like his last month has been really good.
OPS now or something like that.
Oh, for the overall for the year. Well, it's still not great, but he is such a prime example of something that frustrated us for years, and especially with Polanco and with Kepler and with Buxton, guys coming back from the IL either after no rehab assignment, like skipping a rehab assignment and just jumping right back in the lineup, or in Polanco's case after 10 at bats or something, and then guess what? Kepler goes 2 for 30 and looks weird in the outfield too when he initially came back. Right. And then you go, well, this is a guy who's been struggling, and now is he just cooked? What's going on here? It turns out, once he got those, weeks worth of at-bats, which weren't pretty, now he's back to being, the healthy version of himself. And obviously this is above and beyond what he's been able to produce, but this is not new. I mean, it's similar to Buxton's streaks. Kepler is pretty streaky too, and Kepler can carry a lineup, which is why he's on this team. Is you can fall in love with Kepler for 2 weeks at a time, multiple times a season, and clearly Derek Falvey and the front office have done that. And he's stepped up at a very good time for them. we talk about Julien and Kirilloff have been carrying him, but Kepler's been every bit as good as them.
Yeah.
They need him to keep going. Part of me, of course, says,
well, good luck with that.
Part of me says that, yes, because I'm a jerk. But part of me also says, like, is this just inevitably leading to a trade anyway? But I don't know that. I mean, at some point, mine and maybe ours, but I'll just say mine, my thoughts about what should be done with Kepler has so long ceased matching the Twins' thoughts with it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm on like year 3 of being like, they should think about trading this guy. And so I've just given up any notion of trying to predict what they will actually do with him or what their actual, I don't know, kind of plan is with him. But, the way he's playing now, obviously, why would you want to trade him?
Sure.
But, I don't know. Gallo.
But you're going to have to find some room for that right-handed hitting outfielder.
Somebody's going to have to go. And that's not even, if you want to give Wallner a shot, then somebody really has to go. Right. It's not clear to me they want to give Wallner a shot. But
that is not clear.
We'll see. Let's see. I had a couple more little notes here. Kenta Maeda pitching well.
Really well.
In a way that was surprising, which is, for him, big jump in velocity. Was throwing 92, 93 last time out, which 2020 is the last time anybody saw that from Maeda. And even then, you didn't see it a lot from Maeda. We've talked about how he doesn't really need that velocity to thrive. He works on command, control, kind of pulling the string on hitters, keeping them off balance with a wide assortment of, changing speeds, changing eye levels, breaking balls, movement, that sort of thing. He can do that at 89, 90, but he can definitely do it at 92, 93.
Right.
And he looks very good. I mean, that would be just huge for them if he can stay healthy. And
the strikeout numbers are just so impressive since he's come back.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, he's good. I mean, I would have loved to have seen a full Kenta Maeda career in a Twins uniform because I think he would be. I mean, first of all, the Dodgers didn't even see it because he pitched 6 years in Japan before he came. He was already 30 or whatever when he came to the Dodgers. But he was beloved for the Dodgers, except even then they kept moving him into the bullpen and he would have great postseason in the bullpen, but he didn't like that. And then he comes over here and in 2020, that's as good as a pitcher since Johan has pitched for them. Now, it was only, I don't know, a dozen starts or whatever because it was the half season. Then he gets hurt, comes back, doesn't look right. And I'm not saying he'd be the best pitcher in Twins history or anything, but he's a very fun pitcher to watch at age 35 with a limited gas tank. I can't even imagine how fun he would have been to watch at age 25 when he was actually throwing 93, 94, whether at the end of his Japanese career or the beginning of his Dodgers career. Like, I bet he would have just been a fascinating pitcher to watch from a keeping everyone off balance, throwing strikes, and like you said, you look up and it's like, he's got 9 strikeouts? Like, how did that happen? He's just a really – I mean, he's a perfect example of a veteran pitcher, not a thrower, a guy who just knows what he's doing. Now, with that said, he can fall apart at any time from a physical standpoint.
Right.
We saw that even – he looked great at the beginning of this year and then fatigue and then back on the IL. So it's one of those spots where you
got maybe 12 starts left this year, something like that. We got 65 games left to play.
Yeah, roughly.
So maybe 12, 13 starts left to do this year. He's got 5 in the book since he came back. He's looked like a number 2 guy since he came back.
Yeah, he's
right?
looked great.
To the point where I think I said this a week ago, maybe I said it 2 weeks ago, I don't know. But if he keeps this up, and that's a huge if, right? The qualifying offer becomes back in play.
No, it doesn't. There's no way you need to give him a $20 million deal at age 36 coming off a season where, who's giving him $20 million? No one. You have to at least realize who you're competing with, theoretically.
Well, at 36, you're
never
right,
get anywhere near
3 years,
$20 million.
3-year deal.
I bet he might not get $10 million. Look, if he has 10 great starts to finish the season.
That's what I'm saying. Right now, but if he has another 12 starts league, he's had these last 5 starts. That's what I'm saying.
But he still has a 5 ERA for the season. He's 36 years old. He'll have been on the IL once since Tommy John. Like, the qualifying offer can be a blanket for a lot. But you still got to want to pay the guy $20 million.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? Like,
the truth is,
he would accept that so fast.
You might be able to get him back for 1 year 15 or 1 year 16.
I'll take the under on all of those. There's no way he's going to get. What 36-year-old pitcher coming off Tommy John who at a month ago looked cooked is getting 15, 18, 20 million dollars.
Let's see another. I understand
the idea of bringing him back.
The big question mark to me is the 12 starts.
Well, yeah, if he pitches like a Cy Young winner for the next 12, but I'll take the under on that too. Bringing him back is not a bad idea. I mean, they're going to be in a position where they're going to need at least one starter next year.
Yeah.
If they don't re-sign Gray, which I don't expect them to do. No, he's going to get the qualifying offer. Right. But it's for the same. I mean, like, Mahle won't get the qualifying offer, not because they wouldn't necessarily bring him back, but like,
because he'll take it.
What are you competing with? Yeah, it's the same thing.
Right.
It's like, they'd love Donovan.
Tommy John.
I mean, put it this
half
way.
of the year.
Like, they'd love Donovan Solano back probably next year. But you're not going to give him this qualifying offer because, he'll take it. You actually don't, generally speaking, you don't want, well, I shouldn't say that. If they made it to Gray, they'd be fine with him accepting it because that's a 1-year, $20 million deal for a guy, he's making 13 this year. You'd probably pay him close to 20. I mean, Pablo Lopez signed an extension for 20-something a year. But also, there are circumstances where you'd rather they reject it.
Sure, of course.
Because you want the draft pick, and if they reject it, you can still attempt to re-sign them. Like that, I mean, maybe the Odorizzi situation was the closest to kind of a coin flip. He ended up taking it for 18 and then was terrible for them. But Sonny Gray, well, we talked a lot about this on the Patreon.
We talked on we spent 20 minutes on that Sonny Gray start. So
I think just big picture with him,
kind of get through this.
You got to walk the walk after talking the talk, and I don't mean walk.
Quit walking the walk.
Fewer walks.
Right.
And I don't mean this in like I'm trying to tear down Sonny Gray because he's been good, and I think he's genuine when he says all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just you can't spend months or even a year and a half talking about how
going deep in games,
and you were removed too early, and you want to stay in the fight, and you create this whole narrative through that, which he didn't intend to do, but he did, of Baldelli just takes him out too early, and then struggle every fifth inning or sixth inning and fall apart and walk guys with the bases loaded, and then afterward go, I don't know what happened. Like I mean, I'm not picking on him in the sense that he's more frustrated than anybody. Like his last few post games, including the one going into the All-Star break that I was at here, he was extraordinarily frustrated and basically said,
"I'm even more. I'm more frustrated. I think when I get frustrated about this, listen, I understand him wanting to do that and trying to do that and being unable to do that and being frustrated not being able to do that, go deep in games. Really, what I'm frustrated with about all that is the people that continually sort of embrace that narrative of Sonny Gray needs to be able to go deeper or something like that. It's like you're not watching. I'm not as frustrated with Sonny Gray not being able to go because because I think he's earnest.
You're
I think
saying
he's really
on some level,
stuff.
how often does he need to fall apart in the fifth inning before people start to go, they're not removing him because it's Baldelli removing him. They're removing him because he just walked the bases loaded and then walked a run in 3 times in 4 starts.
I think I'm more frustrated with that, with hearing that sort of narrative still floating around out there, despite all the evidence to the contrary.
But we've seen that over the years, and my premise or my hypothesis that I've said here is I think it's gotten worse in that regard because of the Bally Sports situation, which is that I think there are a lot of hardcore Twins fans and even probably people listening to this show who rarely, or at least much less often, watch the games or watch the full games. And instead they check the box score and it'll say Sonny Gray gave up 3 runs in 5 2/3 and he left with 82 pitches. And you go, well, why would they have taken him out after 5 2/3 after 82 pitches? Well, because he had a shutout going. And then he got to the 5th inning and he walked 3 people.
Gave up 4 runs in the 4th, and then in the 5th inning he'd walk, put 2 guys on base and hit a guy.
Right.
Like, I mean,
but it takes. We see this. There's a lag of when actions lead to narrative changes, and in some cases, once a narrative is so firmly established, it's not getting changed. And I wonder if that's the case here because people played into so much of his. I'm a veteran. I want to stay in. I want to, and people want to believe that, especially from a guy who speaks openly about it like him and who's a veteran all-star guy. You want to believe that Sonny Gray has this ability if you just let him do it and you just don't give him these quick hooks that he's going to go 6, he's going to go 7, he's going to go 8. But if you actually look at Sonny Gray's career, he's been the opposite of that.
Right.
Sonny Gray's been a really good pitcher for a really long time for a bunch of teams. He's not a workhorse. from a durability standpoint or from a within start standpoint.
Right. What's the most innings pitched he's ever had in a season?
Well, when he was young with the A's, he threw 200 a couple times.
Okay, all right.
But I don't think he's topped maybe 150 maybe once in the last 6 years, something like that.
Okay.
You know, I bet whatever he ends up this year is going to be more than he's thrown in a long, long time. And, you know, he threw 125 last year, something like that, I want to say.
Yeah.
And again, this is not – he's just a pitcher. I mean, it's not a big criticism of him.
Right.
A lot of pitchers go through this. I just think the difference is, for whatever reason, people view it differently when he's the one who's struggling in the fifth inning or the third time through a lineup, or, you know, falling apart just randomly after throwing 4 scoreless or whatever, than if it were Joe Ryan or Pablo Lopez or Kenta Maeda or whatever. It's, for some reason, there's this narrative that Sonny Gray has this great ability if only the Twins would keep their hands off and let him do it, which is fine. And I actually think, going back a month or so, they were more willing to try to let him do that. But more often than not, when they did take the hands-off approach, he gives up a single and he walks 2 guys, and then it's like, well, now what do we do? Like, now this game is in the balance right here.
Sonny Gray, last time he pitched over 150 innings was 2019, 175 with Cincinnati.
And then before that?
Before that, it was 2017 with 162 innings.
Right.
Last time he was really close to 200 was 2015 at 208. So, I mean, over the last 6 years, 105. Well, this year 105. Like he's on a good pace this year. 150 or so. Last year 119. Cincinnati 2021 135. 2020 shortened season 56. 2019 175. 2018 130.
Right.
Then 162.
I mean, he's a 150 inning guy.
Right.
And some of that's just because he can't make 32 starts physically more often than not. But some of it is because he's not a guy who, this ain't prime Justin Verlander where you just go, well, I don't have to manage today. And so I don't know. I think we're not doing Sonny Gray any favors by acting as if he's something he's not. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because then it just gets more frustrating.
And I kind of like him trying to pump himself up.
Absolutely.
Not portray himself, not trying to lie to everybody, but saying to himself, hey, I want to go deep. I want to go deep. That's what I want to be.
But you got to do it.
Yeah.
At least you got to do it relatively consistently.
I got to tell you, the other fact check I did is Tony Oliva never won an MVP, AL MVP, which surprised me. That rookie year that he had, where I was like, did he win MVP that year? Yeah, 1964. He came in 4th.
And then 65, he didn't win the MVP?
He finished 2nd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he has all kinds of other top 5 finishes for MVP. He never actually won one.
Second place.
Who
the hell won in 1965? I'm going to say Boog Powell. No, I don't know. Somebody like that. Somebody from Baltimore.
Hold on.
It's always somebody from Baltimore.
That's right. Yeah, in MVP, he was in 65, he was 2nd. And then in 70, he was also 2nd.
Who was first in 1965?
Zoilo Versailles.
Oh.
Which we knew.
His own teammate.
Yeah, I had in my mind that Zoilo was 1967. Yeah. Right.
That's a good fact check, John.
Thanks.
Let's not do fact checks on this show, though.
By the way, you are right. He did finish 2nd to Boog Powell.
In a different year.
1970.
Yeah, see? I know a little something about it.
Pretty good.
My brain's just addled by drugs and alcohol and talking to you so much.
That'll do it.
Some of the details get...
Tell Dr. Chrissy about that. You can... you can commiserate with her about it.
Chrissy was a Mensa candidate before she met you. Now she can't even do her multiplication tables. Right. It's bad. That's just being around you and me, probably.
Right.
All right.
My business partners will also vouch for that.
Well, one of your business partners was never a Mensa candidate.
You can imagine what my kids are doing.
Yeah, they turned out remarkably well. I don't know how, really. But okay, so we will be back Monday to talk about the White Sox series.
And the relievers.
And also, assuming there's not a full show to be done about the White Sox series. If there is, that's fine too. We'll start to kind of break down reliever by reliever. And I actually, having done some of the prep work on that, it's a very deep group of relievers who are
for what you're looking for.
Right. I mean, there's some lefties I like a lot.
Yes.
There's a bunch of righties that would fit.
There's even some high upside arms out there.
So I think
you really want to go crazy.
And we would love to have you join us, not only for Monday's show, but for, the rest of the season, like John said earlier. But at least through the trade deadline.
Wednesday, we might dive more into the trade deadline. We might do a mailbag. We might do a lot of stuff. We do different things during the week than we could do this overall weekly recap. We'd love to have you try it.
Here's what I'll say. This is my final best pitch to join the Patreon. If you're listening to this sentence that I'm saying right now, you have made it very far into a very long podcast that we have done. And if that's the case, I think there's like a 99% chance that you would also enjoy the Patreon podcasts, which are an hour plus commercial-free deeper dives on stuff. So Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. Sign up. When we put a new episode out, it costs you $1. Probably costs you $5 through the trade deadline. Then you can assess if you want to stick with us down the stretch.
I'd say risk $5.
Yeah.
$5. Sign up now. Risk $5. Give yourself a $5 budget to try something new.
Yeah.
And try out the Patreon.
We each get then $2, and we have to give Patreon $1. So that's what you're doing.
Right.
You're giving us each $2. Thank you to BetterHelp, SodaStick,
and Game Time.
And if you don't subscribe to the Patreon, we still love you.
We'll see you next Friday.
Less, but we still love you, and we'll talk to you next Friday.
Gleeman.